Great discussion, and I said it's our 8th annual Collaboratory, Connection Community Collaboratory. And John points out that, well, it says the 7th over there. And the reason it shows the 7th is this is last year's slide. And this is Brad's computer, and Brad set it up and left the room, and I'm not sure where he put the other file. So I think it's just easy. All we have is a graphic that shows all of these people, and as it turns out, we have all exactly the same people. So that's a great move. So anyway, welcome to the session. We started this 8 years ago. Marc and I think we were in Chicago, and he was trying to catch a cab or something like that, and I was further ahead in the line, so I smuggled him in with me, and I gave him a cab ride to the airport, and we kind of baked this thing up, the idea of a collaboratory for the industry. And first of all, we had to come up with a name, is what the heck we do, and that was that we're all basically in the connection business. All we do is we connect physical points to our systems and connect people, and that job of connection is just getting bigger and bigger. So what I've done is I've asked these folks, which are stewards in the industry, and they basically all have been at this many years, maybe not quite as many as me, but close. And their perception of what's going on, I am very interested in, because I'm totally confused. I cannot understand whether I'm going senile or if in fact there's just a lot of change going on in the industry, and I think it might be a little bit of both. But anyway, so the format that we're going to run tonight already, this afternoon, is I'm going to ask each one of them to come up, give a brief intro of themselves, and do a 5-minute presentation, which I'm going to hold them to fairly tight, and then we're going to have them discuss. First of all, we'll give the first option to the panel. If anybody in the panel wants to build or debunk what one of the other people have said, that's the first priority. And then once they've finished, then we'll open it up to the audience. So that's the format. So it's just an open collaboration. We can talk about anything, go any direction. Haven't given them much guidance except the fact that they have 5 minutes to tell their story of what they think is going to happen in 2020 and what they saw happening in the industry, and basically engagement platforms being born connected or whatever, or the open push that's happening by the young folks that was in this room just before. Any one of those topics would be excellent, or anything else they want to talk about. First, I'm going to call what's his name? Marc Petock, because he would help me get this thing going. Marc Petock.
All right. First of all, I apologize for my voice. Ever since the Control Trend Awards, which I see several of you were there, and the Kansas City Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, my voice is gone. So hopefully you can at least hear me and understand. I'm going to start off talking about 9 key pieces that I see, especially that is occurring and will continue to occur in 2020 and then beyond. First and foremost is digital transformation. We've all heard digital transformation. Many of us are going through it within our own businesses and the way we operate as business entities. But where I'm seeing digital transformation really take place is within the built environment. Owners, operators, system integrators, OEMs are really starting to embrace this whole concept of digital transformation. Second key topic for us as a collaborative group here and those out on the floor: cybersecurity and information security. And I want to add a third one to that today: privacy. We are starting to have guidelines and rules concerning data privacy and information, especially as we talk about embrace the occupants and tracking occupants within buildings and so forth and so on. And in fact, with respect to cybersecurity, If you didn't know, Oregon and California, beginning of January 2020 of this year, has recently passed compliance regulations when it comes to IoT connected devices. This is both from the consumer side, the cameras in our kids' rooms, and all the devices we put in these buildings. The third one is all about connectivity. We've heard connectivity for years. Connectivity is becoming much more robust. And where I see finally where we're going towards the middle of this year, going into next year and so forth, is the influence of 5G. We've all heard it. And Wi-Fi 6. If you haven't heard about Wi-Fi 6, take a look at it. Another direction is enabling the edge. We are doing more and more connectivity, command and control, data analytics, data acquisition at the edge. The processors that are in our controllers today are much more powerful, so we can do data and analytics computations and curation right at that edge level. Then, if you decide, you can send all or some of that up to a cloud. I'm not saying that the cloud is going away. I'm saying that exact combination of edge and cloud is where we're going, and you'll see a lot of that this year. Data. We've all heard about it. We've all talked about it. And when we all started in this industry, it was all about big data. Big data is gone, as far as I'm concerned. It's smart data. And data that is usable to you and the vast audience that data is going to. It's no more about, I've got more data than you. It doesn't do any good. It's data that you can use, and true actions are taken care of, are coming off of that. The next one is the expanding role of sensors. While sensors have been around for a long time in our industry, more and more use of sensors are being incorporated, whether most of them are wireless. Again, occupancy levels, CO2, occupant health, and so forth and so on. So the increased use of sensors is another area that I believe we're starting to see a lot of movement on. Next is artificial intelligence. We have heard about artificial intelligence for a long time. Do we really have a lot of artificial intelligence in our industry going on right now? No, I don't believe we do. We are starting to get more and more artificial intelligence capabilities and stuff. And I think as we continually move, that it is in fact a very powerful and tool, and will have a profound effect on how we manage and operate our buildings. Next is platforms.
Keep going.
Next is platforms. It's all about platforms. And I wrote an article for Ken last month on engagement platforms. We have moved from BAS platforms to integration platforms to operating platforms. It's now about engagement platforms in which people are engaged, systems are engaged, and so forth and so on. So with all that, that's our 9 things that I see where the industry is going today and tomorrow.
Thanks.
Was that 5 minutes?
That's he's going to spill his in 5 minutes.
All right, thanks. All right, so I'm going to take a little different approach. I'm going to be Debbie Downer. Okay? Trying to assimilate thoughts from 8 years in the industry, starting at the early days of DDC through all of the phases. And I'm going to draw an analogy. Some of you may know me from my time at Tritium. And one of the things we used to joke about there was, because it was one of the first platforms to bring all the protocols together, we used to joke, we used to say, we love protocols, right? More, right? There'd be a new standard, but the interesting thing, nothing old ever went away, right? So there's a new standard in this, but the old ones are still around. And I want to use that analogy for what I think is one of the most fundamental things, and it actually gets to the title, Human Connection, here. This is what owners are facing. the problems and challenges that they've always had don't go away even though we come out with new stuff, new technology and new whatever, right? I still see owners struggling with getting a good specification written for their control system. Hello, 1982, bell bottoms, okay? But people still struggle with that, okay? We see people who buy systems that have open protocol struggle to be able to connect to them and integrate to them, right? So all of these problems that we've seen in the application of controls as we introduce new technology, we can't seem to push any of the old ones off the list. So people are still dealing with all of these types of things. And now we talk about all the new stuff coming in, as Marc mentioned. What did that do? It just added to the stack of things people have to think about, worry about, or know something about in order to take advantage of it. And one of the biggest barriers I see to the industry moving forward, owners moving forward, is the fact that there are so many things on the list. It is beyond decision makers' ability to absorb them all, understand them all effectively, right? So that there's a hesitancy, and I would say one of the biggest factors in holding back the industry is the hesitancy of owners and operators and procurement people being overwhelmed because we can't seem to get anything off the list. On the other side, you just go, well, wait a minute. People can get good specs written. Integration can happen. Smart buildings can happen, right? We see examples of, some of the smartest buildings in the world, right? Look at every possible, it's fantastic. What's the problem? There's 2 of those buildings, or 3 or 5 or 10, but there's hundreds of thousands that are nowhere near that. So the challenge we all have to deal with, and I believe in an odd way it may be becoming even more obvious or more of a barrier right now as we try to bring new technology, is the barrier to flowing this through our industry, which is kind of arcane, the value chain of how things get into buildings, right? And the procurement and design processes that dominate the industry, but in effect, they were all there for a good reason, let's say, but they're becoming a barrier to going forward at the speed that we need to take advantage of things and have sustainable, highly performing buildings. So those are my comments.
Great, thanks, Don. You gave us Marc, you want to speak to it? Tell us your thoughts, your visions for 2020?
Yeah. So occupant experience is, my name is Martin Villeneuve. I'm the president of Distech Controls. So good afternoon, everyone. Occupant experience is very near and dear to my heart. So the human connection. Let me give you an example. And I try to find what are the roots of that, why it's so important. Because we can do a lot of product, a lot of software, a lot of hardware, but if we don't exactly pinpoint what's the issue and what is the problem we want to solve, maybe we do things that we don't necessarily want to do. So we try to analyze through an example. So let me give you an example of a software publisher that in 2012 decided that hey, we're all going to go to the cloud. So they say, okay, we are a dominant player in the market now, 2012. We want to hire 600 programmers. We want to go in the Boston area. They have 1,200 resumes coming in. They do interview. Everything is going well. Nobody's applying. Nobody responds to the offer. So they say, okay, what's the issue? So they call a dozen of the applicants that were offered jobs, and the answer was, we want to work downtown. I don't have a car. I don't have a driving license. I want to work in a Google-type environment. So they said, okay, so we changed completely our strategy, but the building that we built or the location where we want to hire the people does not fit. So a couple months after, they realigned their strategy, opened an office downtown where half of the people could work from home, and in a more of a Google work and environment, collaborative. And they filled all the position. So it says a lot into what's the need, why we're doing all of this, why are we bringing all this technology. So to me, 4 driving factors are in this. energy conservation initiative, urbanization, digitalization, and the expectation of the digital natives. So when we bring all those four parameters, I'm asking myself, okay, it's a strong trend, but is it enough? So speaking with a lot of end user, the property owner, the one who owns the building, do you know that 85% of the building owner in the world are insurance company or bank? And the building is their most liquid asset. So when they see these trends and their willingness to make a profit on the building and be able to sell it and buy another one quite rapidly, they thought very fast, okay, I need to respond to those needs in order to increase the rent, increase the value of the building, and make sure I have 100% occupied space when I want to sell the building. And this at any time, because they don't know exactly when they want to sell it. So if you have this premise in mind, and then you say, okay, what are the product who's going to respond to this? Then you're going into the human connection, the occupant experience. Today, it's what we call an app. Today, it's you want to interact with the building with an app like you do with a lot of things in the space today. So you want the occupant to be able to not only adjust the temperature, change the lighting level, change the lighting color, also find a meeting rooms, find the one which is the closest available. You're working in a home or a little bit in our office. So in the office, you want to come there and you want to find an open spot that nobody's going to come half an hour after and say, hey, it's my spot. I was just down the road. So all of this is driving, I say, the product strategy. In order to achieve this, there's a whole bunch of technology. So there's the standard technology that we use to put in place, the sensors and the actuators, the BMS world, the BACnet world that we call the OT world. And then there's the IT world, the IT about the software application, the app. So how to bridge all of this? The OT world is much more local-based, local intelligence with a little bit of cloud. The IT world is a little bit hardware on the space, but a lot in the cloud. So we need to find a way to bridge all this information, which half of it is OT, half of it is IT, half of it is local, the other half is cloud. So to bridge all that information, it's, to me, the challenge of the year and probably of the decade. So we're beginning a new decade, 2020, this year. 2020? Yeah. So, yeah, that's what I had to say. Super. Thank you.
All right, thanks. My name's Troy Davis. I work for EnOcean, and we are a wireless device manufacturer. We make components and sensors, switches, different things for within the building. So it gives me the warm and fuzzies to hear Marc talk about one of the things that's really important in the future of buildings is sensors and controllers and switches, and they're all wireless. And so that's fantastic in our industry to hear this. So the occupant experience is an interesting one because there's multiple ways that you have to interact with buildings, right? I mean, we're interacting with this particular building. It's a convention center. We would all be considered visitors to this space. We're not employees. We don't work here every day, so we can't really be tracked by the convention center as someone who's known without some sort of app and different things. And so there's a real challenge with the software groups out there that they have to manage these different things. And during that management, there's very logical ways you could do it to just say, okay, we track a Bluetooth ID of somebody who walks in that's got their phone in their pocket. We've all got Bluetooth IDs that are floating around right now. We could collect and have that information available to us. But how do you actually blend that into a positive experience in the building, right? I mean, I'll give you an example. Last week I was working in our office in Munich, Germany. I used my American Express card to buy dinner. Within 5 minutes, I had an email from American Express that said, hey, welcome to Germany. Here's all the places where your American Express card is accepted, right? And while that may seem helpful, I took it as American Express is now tracking what I'm doing, where I'm going, which I knew they were probably doing anyway, but I don't want to hear about it. I don't want them to tell me that they're actually tracking me. I landed in Amsterdam to change planes, bought a sandwich. Within 5 minutes, had another email, welcome to the Netherlands. Here's where your American Express card is used, right? So there's this really sensitive place where the software providers really need to be thoughtful about that. I mean, certain retailers will send you a coupon while you're standing inside the store. They can tell where you're standing in front of which shelf. They'll send you a coupon right there. And I know that if I received that, I would immediately delete the app off my phone, right? I don't want them to track me. I don't want them to know how long I stand in front of the chips before I make a decision and buy the Doritos or whatever. So there's this really sensitive thing which comes down to the privacy and all of that. You have to guard the privacy on the security side and make sure that nobody can take that. But you also have to think about the privacy feeling from your occupants and your people who are in the space, right? You have to make sure that you're protecting the experience that they're having within the building. So it gets pretty interesting, and then you've got to manage, if you're a landlord managing apartment buildings, you've got to feel the same way. You can't say, hey, we noticed you haven't left your apartment 4 days. Is everything all right? How are things going? You have to, that becomes part of the experience, and it really needs to be carefully evaluated by the software providers and the people who are doing these things. And then another thing that we've come to see in the industry is, we provide the sensors and the data and sort of all of the information that these software platforms need. But one in particular was relying so heavily on the cloud that even the light switches were going to the cloud before they would turn the lights on. The internet companies or the internet supplier in that area decided to do some maintenance on the lines. None of the lights worked for a day and a half. So, again, you have to think through sort of all these what ifs and what if this part's down and that part's down. We can't rely on some of these complete networks to always be available all the time, right? So I'm a little bit on the Debbie Downer side with John a little bit. So, but that said, there can be some real positives involved in all of this. I mean, for a building owner, they can know exactly how many people are in here. And so they can say, okay, there's 30 people in here. So we need to kick on and send some fresh air in there because of the 30, 12 of them are asleep. So we need to either get a different speaker or we need to have some fresh air pumped in there to keep some things going. And this becomes a real thing in schools, universities, K-12 schools, whatever. You can actually link productivity and all of these different variables to a lot of the information that comes out of there. And that's, again, where it comes back to the artificial intelligence side of things. The big data was a big deal. Everybody said, oh, big data, big data, big data. All they did was buy bigger hard drives and store all that data, and nobody ever knew what to do with it, right? It just sat there. And so there was this thing where it actually became too much data. So they were saying, okay, yeah, now I've got the temperature sensing in 4,000 rooms every 12 seconds for a year and a half. So that's pretty neat. Right? What do I do with that? So that's where the artificial intelligence is really coming into play. So we as a sensor manufacturer are starting to feed this data into these artificial intelligence systems like the IBM Watson, and we've got Microsoft Azure, and we've got a whole bunch of these different platforms that are available to feed this data in there. And the interesting part about that is we also have to go with the old systems because the old systems aren't going anywhere. So we now have to take this artificial intelligence, somehow or another link it back to a BACnet MSTP system from 1982 and make it all work together, right? So it's a really, really interesting sort of collaboration that has to take place in an industry that is historically very, very slow to change. So I'm finding that the sort of the people at the leading edge are running and sprinting while they're sort of dragging this huge anchor of all of these historical programs that are out there and these old protocols and everything that they still have to bring with them because they can't get rid of them. So so that's kind of one of our big tasks now is to sort of figure out how we can take all of our sensor data, get it into the IBM or other clouds, artificial intelligence, so it can be legitimately evaluated and become a piece of valuable information for a building owner so that they can have all of this key information available to them and be able to use it in an actual way that makes sense, right? Because, like I said, if you have temperature data for years and years and years in your building, or CO2 data even, doesn't really matter. So if you can evaluate it in a way that really makes sense, then that's where it becomes quite valuable and important. And I'm done? Yeah. Minute? Okay, yeah, I'll run out of time there. Yeah. So perfect, thanks.
Okay, thanks. I got to point out again that we're using last year's slide, so the theme this year is our 2020 vision, not the 2019 plan. But anyway, you want to give us your 2020 vision?
All right. I'm going to go looking backwards. So, okay, my name is George Thomas. I'm president of Contemporary Controls. And I was going to think about when Ken mentioned about innovation. I want to talk about innovation from a perspective of a business owner, saying is it an opportunity or a threat? And I think we all have to look at that. And Wall Street Journal starts doing these obituaries now. And I'm a big fan of reading these obituaries in the Wall Street Journal because I like to know what these people did in their life and the things they accomplished. And the one I ran across was Clayton Christensen. He was a Harvard business professor, and he's the one who wrote the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, which was in 1997. I have that book on my shelf. I had read that before. And the tagline is when new technologies cause great firms to fail. And so he talks about this S-curve, and what it means is that when we start out and we do development, we put all kinds of resources in and we gain some following of customers, and it starts going up just like exponentially. Where this is wonderful. We're gathering, we're putting in a little less effort and gaining more customers. But there's an inflection point. And that inflection point is that starts going the other way, where we put in more and more resources and we accomplish very more people jumping into it. And to that point is that we're feeding the beast. We're using our resources to feed the beast to keep our customer base happy. And then you get these little startups who are going through their S-curve, doing a disruptive technology, and to be blindsiding the other people. And that's what the book's about. It's a great read, and it's all about destructive technologies. So in our experience, even in mine and Ken's, we've had experiences of, one of the first hobbyist operating systems was Digital Research's CPM. They gave way to when IBM decided to make a computer for the home. They took Microsoft's DOS. That was a big mistake by CPM to miss that. And now you don't know about Digital Research. And then you go on to Novell, who decided to take the dominance of Microsoft's single platform, single computer station with all kinds of apps on it, and have a file system. And that was a thing that Microsoft had to respond to. And then, of course, the biggest disruptor of all is probably the internet, the browser, coming in with a browser base, which we all know and love these days. So anyway, the other thing I picked up in the news is this idea that Google's Alphabet broke $1 trillion in market cap. That is so hard to conceive. There are 4 names, and they are the usual suspects. We got Alphabet, we have Apple, we have Amazon, one of the greatest disruptors, and we have Microsoft, who continues to reinvent themselves. So with Alphabet, they destroyed print advertising. Apple mobile telephones now become everything. Everyone here has got one. It just changes your life. And they want it as a human-machine interface with free apps, what they want from us. And then, of course, Amazon with brick and mortar. They destroyed the malls. Look at the empty malls. It's certainly around Chicago area we see them. And this is an example how your great plans can be really attacked. So what are we facing today? I'm going to look at cloud computing real quick. Amazon's revenue on cloud computing, AWS, is $35 billion already. Microsoft coming up, 9.7 billion. So I just don't know how our industry is going to drive this here. How are we going to change that complexity? We're taken for the ride. They're driving and we're going wherever they go. That's my reaction to it. So the automation industries have always had a difficulty. We have to adapt to the IT standards and everything else. And so how do we compete with people who have $1 trillion market caps? Well, I say we commit to open systems. We can't do it all on our own. We pick and choose what we can get free, like an Android operating system is free, and we can go through a bunch of technologies that are there for the picking. Why fight it? The other thing, too, we have to join the IT revolution. If they set the standard in the building, we have to live with that. We can't fight it. If we're going to say we're going to do our own network, that has its negative, too. We have to deal with the IT people in their language. And then, like Marc brought up, there's cybersecurity changes. We had to adapt our products accordingly. One is at SP 327 from California. That's the first of the year. This year we had to adapt with passwords. To our customers, it's going to be, hey, something different. But we have to adhere to this. So again, wagging the dog here is California, and we all have to adopt to their standard, and we'll probably be hit with that in Europe. So my suggestion is when we start looking for innovation, watch out, make sure your rice bowl doesn't get broken by it. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. I very much like that one. I'd also like to tie that to our February issue. Our February issue of Automated Buildings is called Born Again Connected, and it's talking about Generation Z coming into our industry. The next article is by one of our young contributing editors, Nicholas, and he says, "Are existing companies built to die?" And his analysis is that we have so much inertia and culture in our existing companies that by the time we get everybody retrained to think open, to think like Amazon and that we're probably going to die. The company's going to go down. So you might be better off to start a startup than and run it parallel to your company rather than trying to fix your company. So that's an interesting comment too. So I'd be real happy if anybody wants to take issue with anything anybody else has said or take issue with what I just said. Does anybody want to touch that or? No? You don't think that's a concern? That we're into radical change as I see it, and how we're going to make that. The kids, they look at databases even completely different than we do. They don't use spreadsheet. There's just a lot of inertia, a lot of change going on, and when we have all of these existing systems, as John mentions, that they just keep on going. But change is occurring, and it appears that the change that does work is based on open standards and long-term analytics. You want to?
I can make a comment on that.
Sure.
I think our industry has lived many change over the course of the year. From pneumatic to electronic, from electronic to digital. I think many companies have survived, have changed, have made a lot of evolution, but many have died as well. So it's probably the natural evolution of business that wants to innovate, that wants to embrace new technology, and the one that don't. So I think it creates as much opportunity in the market, and probably more opportunity than otherwise.
I agree. And those that respond best to it are more or less winning, I think. The other one that gets into that is very complicated for me is the takeovers. As basically what happens in automated buildings always is we get these young innovative companies and they grow and they grow, and if they cross over something like $40-50 million business, then they get taken out by the majors. And I have a history of that. I believe Distech is in that camp. And we certainly have EasyIO buying Johnson, or just, oh, nope, wrong way around. Johnson buying EasyIO. These are significant, but I'd like the panel's response on that. Is this positive? So we basically have had a new company start up that thinks completely different, and it excels rapidly in a 4 or 5 year period, and then it gets taken out by one of the majors. Does that kill innovation? And I think the answer is it depends on the major. Does anyone want to comment on that?
I don't think it may kill innovation there,
Yeah.
but it frees people to go try the next thing, right? I think that's what you see.
The innovators.
The innovators
The-
keep going because they have a hard time hanging around
Yeah, that's
big
it.
companies. So, you know, big companies struggle with how do they keep an innovative culture, but society-wise, I don't think it dampens it at all. You can argue that it accelerates it because it gives people resources to go do the next thing.
Shakes them out of their comfort zone. That's an interesting, okay, that's good.
And I think if you look at our industry, shakeup is we are moving from the traditional building architecture for our systems. And it used to be vertical, up and down, up and down. But where innovation in technology, whether it be processors or different software packages, applications, they're now going to a horizontal. And it's all driven, to your earlier comment, influence of IT. IT people know flat architecture, like that. And I think it is going much more rapidly than we think. So the whole idea of the traditional middleware is being reduced, and direct connectivity, whether it be sensors or Distech products or George's products and whatever, is now being directly do all this stuff at the edge, but then make that direct connection to the cloud, to the Amazons of the world. And it's no longer about, I gotta go through this gateway, I gotta go here or whatever. So I think that is part of how we are being influenced by this change. And whether it be, I don't equate it to younger generation. I equate it to better and less, better technology, I guess.
Great, great. Another observation was,
Probably have to reply to your comment because your name us. Is it okay?
sure. Yeah, no, that's exactly what we're trying to do here, get discussion going.
So you say that when smaller innovative companies that are acquired by a larger company, to me there's two intentions. There's the one who wants to buy almost a competitor or probably gain their innovation capacity.
Yes.
But then what tends to happen is that they tend to give the bear hug. So they love it so much that they kill it. So it did happen a lot in our industry, and we lived it. Or is the intention is to give all the means and the investment in order to grow it. So there's example. Distech, I would call it in this example, because as an example, Acuity Bronze is not into the BMS industry, and they wanted to grow in that arena. So this is what we lived since the acquisition 4 years and a half ago. We tripled in size. So because of the investment in innovation. So I believe there's the two cases, but there's a lot of the bear hug, I believe, that happened into the industry in the past.
Right, right. And actually, just an example of that history in our industry, I think it was Calvin was poking around some of the stuff and actually reading the 20-year-old articles in automated buildings, and came across automated logic, how automated logic saw the world moving on to the web. And he said, oh my God, these guys had it figured out 20 years ago. And they were talking, I think Petze was there at that time too. He said he was only 15, but he's probably was back in those days as well. And the whole thing that happened there is, Jerry Hull and Eric Creighton and all those guys, they had some pretty, and Steve, can't remember the last guy. Anyway, but Steve Tom. And basically, they had some pretty innovative thoughts in how they saw using the internet, which was the new kid on the block at that time. And then what happened to them is they became so successful that they got bought out by Carrier International Technology, or what's it called? Yeah, yeah. And although they have still been an innovation and they're still a force to be reckoned with, when I look back at that, there was a real innovation loss there in the direction. So, yeah, a bear hug. That's a great definition. So how do we? Because I think our industry is very susceptible to bear hugs. I love that. And I don't know how can we keep innovating? How can we keep growing our industry younger? I'm trying to work with these younger fellows, and I just barely understand. I think George has got the same problems. He's got some amazing people working for him that are doing some amazing things, and we both look at each other and we're not even sure what they're talking about, but what they're talking about seems to be working. So we need to rapidly move across the floor and make that change. So any comments there? You got any comments? You're in this situation, George. I mean, you're both ends of the spectrum. You're at the end of life like me, but you got new life. You got new life coming in.
Yes, the young guys, you gotta let them play a bit. You have to, there's a lot of debris, but you have to listen a few times and see how they approach things. They certainly approach things on their apps, on their phones, we would never have tried. But I'd like to go back to the comment about, being bought out of that. In California, the whole attitude, the young engineer in California, they do a startup, and if it fails, it's still a badge of honor. I mean, there is no negative for having 2 or 3.
Fail early, yeah. Fail early.
And they get paid well in a startup, which I cannot conceive of. When we started up, we didn't take salary, but they don't work that way. And they have their own way of dealing with them, and if you want these guys, it's a special situation. So you got to find out what you have there. But that's an interesting, and they're going to have a business plan that they want to be acquired in 5 or 10 years.
Yes.
So if it's a business plan, so be it. They should do it.
Yeah, 5 to 10 years is actually pretty far for a startup to really want to be acquired, right? I mean, they want to be acquired the second week after they file it.
Yeah, that's right.
And then it becomes an even bigger badge of honor. You start, and then you stay with that company until your contract expires. You get your money. You go out, and now you have the resources to do again, innovate again and again. And it makes me always wonder. So we provide products to almost everybody out here, and we have seen a lot of changes in the industry, and we see what happens when one gets bought out. They change wireless protocols, or they move things around, and they do a variety of different things. But it always makes me wonder, are the bigger companies that have been around forever, are they sort of paying attention to these little companies that are doing different things instead of innovating? Are they, is their merger and acquisition department bigger than their innovation department, right? So that's always kind of interesting for me, is to see, are they just buying the innovation that they think is interesting, but because they didn't really develop it in-house, there wasn't a plan, there wasn't an idea around it, I don't know that they really know what to do with it once they get it in a lot of cases. So they sort of get it, and then they go, oh, that was a great idea. Okay, now you make it work. And then the guy goes, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Or is it that plan, or they realize they need to be doing something, and for them to develop it, it's going to take 3 to 5 years. Versus I can go over here and bring this in and incorporate this within a year and a half. So it's time to market and lost opportunity costs, as I look at it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I got one for you.
We got questions.
So is it
Just
the right
George.
way to, let's say like a J2 innovation, they start up and they have I don't call it an angel investor, but they have a primary investor. It happens to be Siemens, okay? $1 million, let's say. And so what do you do there? Are you thinking you're always going to be absorbed by Siemens? How are you going to shape that? Because if they come with a great product, you're going to have to deal with an investor here.
Sure. I mean, personally, if I look at it, if you're looking at Siemens, for example, that's a great example, because Siemens was the venture capital behind our companies. So we don't ever see them. They don't. call us, they don't send letters, they never get birthday cards, so there's nothing that happens with them, right? So from my perspective, if you're a J2 Innovations and you have a Siemens as your investor, I don't think, and I don't want to speak for J2, but I don't think they really care where their investors come from. They don't care about the investors. They're looking at the purchaser, right? Who's going to buy us out, and how much will you get for it?
However, it happened to be that J2 was acquired from
That's right.
Yeah, which is fine.
It's a first hand.
Sure. And maybe Siemens is just in the right place at the right time for that, and they go, we believe in you guys, we're going to grow you, but we get the first chance to buy you. Right? But if somebody else came along 2 weeks before they exercised their option and said, we'll give you double whatever they told you, there'd probably be a discussion that would happen, right? Because I don't think there's a lot of loyalty in startups to their VCs in most cases, so.
But look at the point of the investor. He could throw $1 million, which comes out of petty cash for him, in these different startups. He could have 5 or 10, or 20 or 100. And so, in other words, he can control the development. He can just buy what is successful, which %.
Yeah, assuming they put that in their contract that they get first right, then yeah, it's a great way to see the market and kind of see which one grows. Right?
But we don't have any source of angel capital. You were talking about the Silicon Valley there, and basically they have actually folks that will come up and give you $1 million, and you tell them your idea, and it's so. What I think I just heard you saying, that most of our angel investing has come from large companies, which in fact have a motive, which may not be the best motive to try and move us ahead. And that's what these startups that come. So almost it's maybe we need to develop some kind of a financial path of angel investors who are willing to invest in our industry, so we could actually kind of move a little bit faster that way. So we're kind of, if we keep using our legacy folks to invest, we are probably going to move slower than everybody else, and that's what's happening. So maybe that's why we're moving slower than everybody else. Not sure.
We have a question, but just, I want to disagree with that.
Good.
Ever since we started using 3 letters in our industry, anybody know what they are? IoT. And the world of IoT started to grab everybody's attention globally. Investors, not within our industry, started looking at our industry because they look at the world of IoT and go, who truly is doing IoT now? This industry, all of us, we've been doing IoT for 20 years. This is not new. We called it something else. We called it M2M. We called it whatever. So I think that has been a driver to outside traditional investment in new technologies, new startups. But the last thing is, there is so much hip and hype out there versus real and relevant that has influenced our industry. You start saying, oh, this is great technology, a great product, or whatever. Does it scale? Well, we have it in what do you call it? An initial project. How are you going to support it? What happens is, how are you going to maintain it? How are you going to do that? So I think a lot of that part of the equation is missing from these startups.
Great. So we got bear hugs and we got hip and hop. What's the other one? Anyway, Alper, did you want? Oh, it's over here?
No, I was just curious if we're limiting ourselves a little bit about speaking of innovation only in terms of tangible products. And that sometimes it might be the project and it might be the way we collaborate with each other. I mean, it's fascinating for me to sit here and listen. The last time AHR was here, I was talking to companies about sensors to evaluate who was attending what sessions, because I could flip that to sell it back to AHR and other companies so that they could see what the most successful sessions were and the most interesting topics. But the security issues, the privacy issues, all those types of things are challenging. But how am I going to reach out to my consulting engineer to specify that when you're limited to your local A&E firms that cannot afford to have people with your wisdom on them? Or, you know, there's just a lot of different ways that I think that we could potentially collaborate on a relationship basis and on a project basis, and it doesn't always have to be a tangible product to monetize it.
Good. Good point. Andrew, you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm thinking about innovation, what is actually being innovated, what is actually being created, right? And when I sort of think back on the innovations that have actually changed things in the world, they're usually incredibly simple innovations. Think something as simple as spreadsheets, right? All spreadsheet does is calculate two things over and over again, right? And yet they can be used for a whole bunch of things, right? The browser is innovation, and it can be used for a whole bunch of things, right? So I think that quite often when we think about innovation, we're thinking about solving a particular problem, but the real innovation that really is hugely impactful are actually simple innovation that enable us to do a whole bunch of other things in a completely new way, right? And I don't know. I was just sort of thinking about that as I was listening about the word innovation. What is it that we're innovating, and is there, you know, what are the problems? What are the big problems, and how can they be simplified into specific things like calculating two numbers, right? And it's a combination of, you know, some of the people side of things and some of the data. I can't remember who was mentioning managing the data and collect. It's kind of just how do we try and distill all of that and find a tool that will actually make a big difference.
Okay, I'd like to add to that, HTML is like automated buildings 21 years ago, I basically started using HTML 1.0.0, and I'm still using it. And the site looks funny, it's got warts and wrinkles, but it still works. And you can pull back the 20 years of data. So that's a standard, and I think you use that when you're selling SkySpark as you go. We need these basic underlying standards. Yeah, that's so I think the HTML fits into your same kind of a thing. So we're looking for that kind of a solution, I think, that would help us as an industry to kind of move ahead.
My point is that don't think of an innovation as to solve a problem, but think of maybe it as an innovation that's kind of inherently will solve a whole bunch of problems.
I look at it as you're solving business outcomes. Innovation drives outcomes.
Yeah, but if somebody,
I think that's too specific, right? I mean, spreadsheets, ultimately they do that, but ultimately it's just adding numbers.
It is, but look how long it takes you to go through a spreadsheet versus putting it in a program, and it does the algorithm, does all that stuff for you within here it is, I'm done.
Yeah.
So anyway, Troy, you good?
Yeah,
a couple thoughts on that. One, I think one of the things that I'm missing for the collaboration piece, right? How can we collaborate better? Is better case studies from these buildings. I mean,
Yes.
Don mentioned there's, you know, both buildings that are smart in the world are great, but we only know about two of them, and there's three. So we really need to know about that third building.
Excellent.
And when, you know, one of the challenges that we're faced with is, you know, I supply to different competitors. So if I'm supplying to competitor one, and then I'm also supplying to competitor two, well, they're both bidding on the same
Right.
campus that's doing 14 buildings, and they don't want to promote the first 7 because the other competitor will come in and take the other 7.
Right.
So they purposely do not promote these buildings. I mean, I've done, one of our customers has done 400 K-12 schools. They refuse
I
to
know
let me
exactly
talk about
what
it,
you're talking
right?
Yeah.
They just absolutely refuse. And it's the coolest program ever. They're knocking it out of the park. The schools love it, the teachers love it, everybody's happy about it. And they say, if you tell anyone who it is, we will stop doing this program because they will lose the business to their competitor. So
Yeah.
they refuse to talk about these really cool collaborative projects. We bring 3 people together, 3 different companies, they do this work, and they get it done quickly, easily, effectively, and it's really great. And nobody's talking about it because they refuse. And they purposely ban us from mentioning the actual project and what the details are associated with that. So it's terrible, and it's holding back the whole industry, because if I could talk about the coolest thing that Distech does, and the coolest thing that SkySpark is doing, and contemporary controls, and everybody, right? If we could just openly talk about that and say, look at this cool project that I just did, it's amazing. And then somebody else goes, that's a great idea. I'm glad you gave me that, Martin, thanks.
Well,
We're going to do that in our next building, and we're going to bid your spec, right? So, you know, it just is really, really hard, and it's really hurting the industry, I think.
I agree with you on that at 100%, and I suffer from the exact same thing as automated buildings, is you think I have all these great articles, but you should see the ones that wriggle away from me because of exactly the same reason, is they've got an idea and they say, well, I don't want to tell you about this for at least I'll tell you about it in a couple of years after I basically have won a bunch of contracts because I've figured out how to crack this nut. And yeah, so we're all using our technology to basically further our own means. So yeah, that's definitely not collaborating and cooperating.
We see a similar thing, but not for competitive reason, but in the application of analytics. Customers do a great job. Wow, can we do a case study? Absolutely not. Right? And I'm like, well, what did we do wrong?
Yeah.
No, you can't tell anybody. Why? Well, we saved 40% of our energy. If we tell people that, they think we were running our buildings terrible before we, which isn't the case. It's the technology that allowed them to see it, but they're afraid to say anything. And the other side we've seen is, no, you can't tell anybody because this has become our competitive advantage and we don't want anybody else to know.
Yeah.
And it is holding things back and limiting, kind of thought leadership of what can be done. And I would say we encounter those things more often than we actually get them.
And especially to that point, in certain segments in the marketplace, you take retailers, their margin is so low today that having analytics, as an example, run things, they're making 2% more margin. That is a competitive advantage. They will never tell anybody. Never.
I just heard one that surprised me was the electric car industry. I think it was about 3 years ago. The electric car industry actually sat down at a table with Tesla, Leaf, and Toyota, and they sat down and they traded secrets because they saw that it was at the point that it was starting to drop, it went off a real good start in electric car business, and then it kind of got into a dip there, and they were concerned that their industry was going to disappear. And it was interesting that the solution was to give away their technologies, to share their technologies, to all band together as an industry. And I think we need to kind of think that kind of a thought. I don't know how to do that, but I think, and in that same analogy, then, if we're the electric car industry, then the traditional automobile industry is IT folks. And I think what we're doing is we are at that situation that we could be taken out completely by the IT folks unless we kind of band together and kind of get some of our ability to move ahead at a very quicker rate. Anyway, comments.
The IT comment is interesting because the IT people are sort of, at least in my experience recently, have started to band together to almost block the connection of the HVAC systems to the IT systems.
Yeah.
And if you've got that going on, you've got some interesting roadblocks again to what you can do. But then I've seen certain companies have innovated around that. They've come up with the 3G systems, and so they can connect now through either LTE or even 5G setup that's coming. They'll be able to innovate around that, but really it's sort of just an artificial roadblock that's been put into place. And it's because this industry, in particular the HVAC industry, has not collaborated with the IT industry to make it work, right? So they just said, hey, we need your network. And for a while they said, okay, you can use it, I guess, and that'll be okay. And now the IT people are saying, yeah, you're not really using it according to our rules, so no, you're out, right? And you can't participate in that anymore. So it's sort of because of the lack of collaboration again, and maybe one company does it one way, another company does another. They all have different rules, different privacy rules, different security settings, all that stuff. The IT people eventually, I think, are just going to block them entirely unless there's sort of a collaboration within the HVAC industry where they come up with a very specific way to communicate over the IT world, right? And it's that first connection is to the actual gateways in the building and Wi-Fi access points, which are in each space. So.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. The whole wireless side of it, the G5, the CBRS, and all those things that are going on in that space. I spent my push on this AHR was we're in an education emergency. We all need to learn a whole bunch really quick, and not just the people that surround us. We ourselves need to learn a lot. And so I spent most of last year going to seminars and stuff, not so much speaking, but actually listening. And went to a lot of Realcomm ones, and it was pretty interesting to see how this wireless, I guess it's just basically a whole new approach. The basic thing is we string glass up and down in a new building, fiber network. Once we do that, we start buying routers. And what's happening is that the cell companies are flat out trying to figure out how they're going to get the G5, or even what G5 is, because it hasn't been defined yet totally. And of course, the decision for them is they have to basically change every router on every pole. For the building, when you're buying all of this stuff brand new, you can buy the greatest and latest technology, and you can load up. You don't have to go G5. You can load LTE, and basically use CBRS and LoRaN and a whole bunch of other things put into your routers, and you somewhat future-proof the buildings. And when the cell company finally gets around to offering G5, you just have to basically download software to include the G5 in your new routers. And so I hadn't saw the building automation people being in the cell business, but from these, both there and that reappeared at Cortec as well, with examples and things like Wi-Fi 8, which I hadn't even heard of. And I got completely lost in that world, but I could kind of see where they were going. And then even at this AHR, I've been dragged off into little closets and stuff, as we always are, seeing new products. And I'm seeing new products that are not any traditional people in our industry, and they're basically building on that phenomena of wireless, sort of, I would say, not traditional wireless, but well, maybe it's traditional wireless, but different approaches. So yeah, so that's going on as well. So, and again, it's the startups that don't have any overhead of having traditional thought and momentum. Anyway, this is what the Collaboratory kind of stuff that I think is of use. And I don't know, maybe we don't need an audience to do this. Maybe we should just go into a room and slug it out. But anyway, anybody want? How about everyone? You do a closing. We're a little bit over. You want to do a quick closing remark? A question? Is there still a question out there?
I want to make a comment for the community and Silicon Valley. I think we are bashing ourselves a little bit too much. I mean, we have diversity going on within our industry at this point. I do see CC Controls as diverse employees. DG Logic was voted as diverse, so we are doing some stuff right. We should have just we should look at it from the positive sides as well.
Mm-hmm. Good comment. Okay. Does anybody want to do a quick close?
Start with.
Yeah, you started this innovation crap.
The question was about an industry. One company does not set an industry, and it's got to be multiple companies. So that's my main comment.
Okay.
To take that, if you each develop in your own silo, you're going to develop about, how many booths are out there? About 1,200 industries, right? So we've got to be careful.
600,000 square feet of
yeah,
booths.
Right. So you got to be careful to try not to develop too many industries within one industry, right? If you're each developing your own. So.
I think we're starting a decade. If you remember 10 years ago, all the subject we had in a room like this was not at all what we're discussing now. The internet had not made that much of an effect in our industry. So I think the next 10 years are going to be very disruptive. So I believe that if we think the change has been very, very great in the last 10 years, wait for the next one.
Good one, Mike. I
And
agree.
for that to happen, we have to understand the challenges the customers are up against in running their buildings and implementing new technology, because those are the things there are no quick silver bullets for.
And I think we don't need to be slapping ourselves. I think for the most part, this industry is being very innovative. We are listening to the customers, and it's just a matter of time. And that's it.
But I get one too, because it's my show. And mine is that we've got another moving piece, which is the OEM and the manufacturer. And some of them, the guys who didn't do anything and still don't have systems that are connected or have any method of connecting, they have an amazing advantage, because they can buy a product like Alper's product and stuff it into their product, and now they've inherited a few standards, BACnet, a whole bunch of standards. They don't even know what they are, but they've got them, and they can also build their software on it. And all of a sudden now we start seeing our control industry, which was pretty much controlled by a lot of these folks at this table, is now slipping off to be an integral part of each product, because each product is connected, is born connected. Anyway, just some thoughts for you guys. I hope you had fun. We had fun doing this. And as usual, you can see I'm a little confused, a year out of phase, but that's trying to keep up. But join me in thanking these guys for coming out.